Little Willie was just 5 years old when destiny came calling. He was sitting in the kitchen with his parents, eating dinner when the phone began to ring. "Little Willie," said his mother, "can you get that? Will you?" So little Willie stood and ran to the kitchen, where the phone hung on the wall. He removed it from the cradle and lifted it to his ear. "Dixon Residence, Little Willie speaking." Now the person on the other side of the phone didn't say, "Little Willie, listen, I'm calling about your destiny." It wasn't anything like that. In fact, the phone call wasn't even for him. "Hi there, Little Willie," said the man on the other side of the phone. "Is your mommy or daddy around?" Little Willie set the phone down on the counter and ran into the dining room and said, "Mom, Dad, the phone's for you." And after some eye glances back and forth, his mom stood and picked up the phone from the counter as Little Willie watched her from the doorway. "This is Nancy." "Uh-huh." "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." "He what?" And then she dropped the phone. Though it did not fall to the ground, the coils of the cord extended until the phone was inches away from the floor, before being yanked upwards and colliding with the wall, and then dropping again. This time, Little Willie's mother, Nancy Dixon, had fallen with it. She let out a scream that caused her husband to put down his fork, after eating everything that was on it and swallowing it down, chasing the bite with a long swig of beer, and come running to the room. "God damn it, Nancy! You just scared me half to death! What are you screaming about?" But his wife did not answer. Instead, she just pointed at the phone, still dangling from the wall. He looked at her, and then to the phone. Shaking his head, he bent over and picked up the phone. "This is Dan." According to the man on the other side of the phone, Little Willie's brother had been riding bicycles near the beach with a friend of his when a car went off the road and into a large crowd of people, killing dozens. Little Willie's brother was among the dead. In the months that followed his brother's burial, his mother refused to get out of bed, and his father only ever returned home in a drunken stupor. And as a result, Little Willie had become the family caregiver. He would bring his mother meals in bed, and when his father returned home and passed out on the couch, Little Willie was the one to remove his shoes and socks and cover him in a blanket and provide him with a pillow. He took over responsibilities for looking after his younger sisters. He rocked them as they cried and changed their diapers and read stories to them before bed. Finding joy in his new responsibilities, he expanded his role of a nurturer outside of the house, and at school, when kids began to cry on the playground, he comforted them. In the classroom, when he saw teachers overwhelmed, he would stand in front of the class and quiet his friends. He stayed in the cafeteria after lunch to help the custodians clean. The happiness of others had become his only concern. He believed it to be his responsibility to bring happiness to the world. And when asked in the second grade, "Little Willie, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Little Willie said, "Sir, I want to cure sadness," though he didn't know quite how he was going to do it. And after all, there was a lot of sadness in the world, and Little Willie was just a kid. Later that year, the Scholastic Book Fair visited Little Willie's school. His father had given him $20 the day prior, which was meant to be spent on food for the week. But instead, Little Willie spent it on a pair of books, both of which, in their own right, changed his view on the world forever. Those books were Brave New World and The Giver. His teacher considered both of them far too advanced for a kid his age, but then again, he'd always been incredibly advanced for his age and ended up reading both books that very same night. Together, they opened his mind to the possibility of the evolving world, a changing world, a better world. They exposed him for the first time to the magic of science, and he began to ponder the ways in which the magic could be harnessed for good, for change, for the creation of happiness, and for the eradication of sadness. He couldn't get enough of these fictional works. He loved the way that Huxley and Lowry used science to craft futuristic worlds, the way that they crafted entire new societies with their creations. how they gave the people happiness, and he craved more of it. So from that day forward, little Willie spent every recess and lunch break in the school library, reading every book that he could get his hands on. And when he asked later what he wanted to be when he grew up, his answer remained the same as before, only now it had become a little more specific. I'm going to be a scientist who cures all of the sadness in the world, though when asked what sort of scientist he wanted to be, he did not know. That is until the 4th grade teacher invited all of the students' parents to share with the class what they did for work. Little Willie found this day to be fascinating, as he was eager to learn about the possible ways that he could bring happiness into the world. There were parents who were accountants and parents who were therapists. There were parents who were plumbers and parents who were bartenders. But it wasn't until Maurice's mother arrived that little Willie found what he was looking for. She arrived late to class. In fact, the presentation had already ended and the children were enjoying cookies and hot cocoa with their parents when she finally arrived. "Sorry I'm late," said Maurice's mother. "I had a very important meeting." All eyes were immediately drawn to her. She wore a light gray pantsuit with the top buttons undone. She wore Prada glasses and carried a Gucci bag around her shoulder, along with black heels with red showing underneath them. A large diamond ring twinkled on her left hand, along with a diamond bracelet on the right. She made her way to the front of the class and introduced herself. Little Willie's ears didn't perk up until he heard her say, "I help people feel better." He then slid to the edge of his seat. "I'm a pharmaceutical rep," she said. She talked about the pills that she sold the doctors and how those pills helped people deal with the pain. She called the pills revolutionary and miraculous and life-saving. And with each adjective that she added to the list, the closer to the edge little Willie slid, until he was nearly out of his chair entirely. She then went to talk about how the pills were made, about how the scientists who performed experiments in laboratories until they found the proper formula, and how they experimented with animals and then humans to cure all sorts of ailments. She talked about the studies, and how they received approval by the government to sell the pills, and how she went to doctors' offices to tell them about the pills, and how she got paid handsomely to do so, and how she got to go to extravagant conferences, and how she owned a Porsche and a Lambo and... Little Willie interrupted her. "There are millions of pills in the world, and every day, hundreds more are being made. Do any of them cure sadness?" They may not cure sadness," she said. And then she looked around at the other parents and added, "But the money sure does help." When the parents all left and the cookies had been eaten and the container of hot cocoa had been emptied and the students had returned to their original seats, the teachers had asked them what they had learned. And little Willie was the first to raise his hand. "I learned what I want to be when I grow up," he said. "I'm going to be a scientist who creates a pill that gets rid of all of the sadness in the world. And I'm going to call it the Begone pill, because it's going to make all of the sadness in the world be gone. Everyone in the world will be saying, 'Bye-bye, sadness. Bye-bye.'" Little Willie dedicated the rest of his childhood to learning all he could about pharmaceuticals. And when he wasn't studying, he was in his chemistry teacher's laboratory experimenting with anything that he could get his hands on. He joined clubs and created others. He entered into every competition that he could find, winning numerous awards and earning tens of thousands in prizes and scholarships. And when the time came, he was accepted into every university that he had applied to, including a full-ride scholarship to the nation's top university for aspiring pharmaceutical scientists like himself, which he eagerly accepted. While there, he took classes in chemistry and biology and physics and pharmaceutical sciences and engineering, passing them all with perfect scores. Meanwhile, he was given unlimited access to the university's many laboratories. And every professor on campus, even those he never had, came to offer him advice, or simply to watch the young prodigy in action. It was there that he became Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, the boy who was going to cure sadness. By the end of his second year at the university, Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, had created the first iteration of the pill that he had conceptualized as a kid, the Begone pill. He spent the next year experimenting on mice, rats, and guinea pigs, doing various things to induce pain or sadness, then providing them with the begone pills and placebos to see their reactions. It took numerous iterations to create a pill that didn't immediately kill his subjects, and then countless more before the results started to show, and then a few more before he was finally ready to begin his testing on human subjects. News of his work not only began to spread to professors on campus, but also to the students.
"I hear there's a kid who's trying to cure sadness,"
the whispers said.
"He's going to make all the pain in the world go away,"
said voices in the hall.
"My professor said that he's going to do it. She said that that kid is a genius."
At the beginning of his 4th year, Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, rented out the school auditorium to speak to 3,086 volunteers who had signed up to participate in the human trials. He thanked them all for coming and then introduced himself as well as his story. And then he asked the crowd, "How many of you have experienced sadness?" Every hand in the auditorium went up. "If you could eradicate sadness from your life forever, how many of you would?" And again, every hand in the auditorium went up. "Well then," said Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, removing a little white pill from his pocket as he said, "Allow me to introduce you to the Begone pill." He lifted the pill to his lips, took a small sip of water, and swallowed it down. And within seconds, his face was overcome with an overwhelming happiness. His smile was so large that it burst into laughter. "Say bye-bye to sadness, everybody," said Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, through fits of laughter. And so they all screamed, Little Willie, the pharmaceutical prodigy, along with them. "Bye-bye, sadness." The human trials were an immediate success, and soon the entirety of the school was lined up outside his home in hopes of joining the trials. And then came the professors, and then the locals, and then the residents of nearby cities, and then people from all over the state. And then investors came to help Little Willie fund the expansion of Healing Humanity Pharmaceuticals. They backed massive factories across the nation to produce the Begone pills. They formed a board of directors made up of the nation's most influential business folk. And soon, Healing Humanity Pharmaceuticals was making millions annually. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then billions. In an instant, it seemed, sadness had been wiped off of the face of the earth. Any time that it came crawling back, all a person needed to do was pop a Begone pill in their mouth, take a swig of water, swallow it down, and wait a few seconds for the overwhelming smile to consume their face. A smile that always seemed to lead to uncontrollable laughter. And seemingly overnight, Little Willie had become an international celebrity. And though fame was never a thing that he aspired to, it was something that he very much enjoyed. The most powerful people in the world lived for the day that they would get to shake his hand. The most beautiful models in the world waited in line for the opportunity to date him. Luxury brands sent him items free of charge just so that way they could be seen on his person. He sat in the front row of every theater and had always been invited backstage after the show. He was the most famous person on the planet. He was the man who had eradicated sadness. He was the hero the world knew that it did not deserve, but was thankful to have. He was the one who had brought happiness to the world. He was a god walking among men. He was no longer Little Willie. He was Big Will. Big Will, the goddamn killer of sadness. He was. Until Kurt Buchanan published his article in the New York Times. Big Will, the killer of sadness, or killer of men. In this article, Buchanan detailed a 5-year-long experiment he had conducted, during which he provided 52,390 subjects with varying diets of Begone pills. And while his experiment confirmed that Begone pills did indeed cause happiness, he also noted that many of his subjects were so dangerously happy that they neglected their basic needs. They no longer went to work, they no longer paid their bills, and they no longer conducted chores around the house, choosing to take another Begone pill instead. But what happens to a man who neglects his obligations? Wrote Kurt Buchanan. If he neglects his job, then he loses his job. If she neglects to pay her rent, she is then kicked out of her home. And when my subjects begin to tell their hunger pains to be gone, replacing their hunger with fits of laughter, what consequence do you think was handed down to them for this neglect? Well, damn death, of course. Big Will, the killer of sadness and men, collapsed in his chair after reading the article. He fell to the floor. He rolled into the fetal position and held tightly to his knees. And he then sobbed. While lying there on the ground, he called an emergency meeting with his board of directors, and during the car ride, he formulated his thoughts. "Hey, Big Will," said the driver when they pulled up in front of the Healing Humanity Pharmaceuticals office building. "Don't listen to that crazy man, huh? I take begone pills every day, and look at me." He was smiling from ear to ear. "You're a hero, Big Will. A hero." Big Will, the killer of sadness and men, didn't respond. He just patted the driver on the shoulder and exited the car. He looked upon the giant building that housed the business that he had created from nothing. It was a beautiful building, an impressive building. He was going to miss it. But he knew what needed to be done. He stormed into the boardroom with red, puffy eyes and slammed his fists on the table and demanded that they remove all pills from every shelf in America. He declared that it was their responsibility, nay, our duty, to keep them away from the public until they had reformed the pill, and then figure out a way to prevent the catastrophe from happening again. And he even said softly, "Maybe sadness can't be cured. Maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe we should just shut our doors and maybe we should." And he collapsed in his chair. He held his head in his hands and sobbed some more. "William," said one of the board members. He cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. "William, we cannot just stop selling our products." "But of course we can," said Big Will. "And we must." "I think that you are misunderstanding us here, William," said another board member. "It's not that we can't stop selling our products. It's that we won't stop selling it." "He's right, William," said a third. "Our stocks would plummet. We would be doomed as a business." And to this, Big Will stood. He slammed his hands on the table again and then screamed, "I don't care about the stock prices. Let the business crumble to our feet. Let it all fade away into nothingness. Let the history books forget our names. I don't care. I did not create the begone pill to make money. I did not start the business for the world to know my name. I created it to cure sadness. We owe it to our customers to..." We owe our customers. Those people. We owe them nothing. We have provided them with a service, William. This is all that we can do. We sell them pills. What they do with our pills is up to them, not us. "Well, sorry, William," said the first. "This is a business after all. The good of the stakeholder comes first. That's just how it goes." The nearest board member removed his pocket of bottled begone pills and set it on the table. "Take one," he said. "It'll help." Big Will, the killer of sadness and men, looked at the bottle of pills in front of him. He thought of the article written by Kurt Buchanan. He thought of the list of names at the end of it. The names of all the people who had died as a result of the pills. His pills. He looked up at the board members. He studied their faces. He remembered that day that he met them all. He remembered the speech that he gave him. The speech about humanity. And above their heads, he saw the ticker which displayed their current stock price. He watched it rise a penny at a time. He thought again of the list of names, and he looked back at the bottle of pills. "Fine," he said, and he poured himself a handful of pills, far more than he had ever taken before, and swallowed them down. And before he knew it, the tears that had dried on his face and the words of Kurt had disappeared from his mind. He was instead filled with thoughts of the wonderful things that had happened in his life. He was a very rich man, an international superstar, one who was worshipped by all types of people, a farmer in Idaho and the actress in Hollywood, cover models and fishermen, the President of the United States and the driver of his private car. He grabbed the board member nearest to him and kissed him. "I love you, man," he said, and then he stood on the table and handed every board member a begone pill. "Take one," he said. "Take one. Everybody take a begone pill." And they just sat there in the boardroom, laughing hysterically. Instead of formulating a plan about how they were going to remove their pills from shelves, or potentially shut their doors forever, they formulated a plan of expansion. Over the next few months, they tripled the number of their factories and their portfolio, as well as doubled their production of all of their old factories, creating even more begone pills for even more customers. And on every pill bottle, they printed reminders for their users to eat every day, to drink water, to go to work, and to pay their bills. And don't forget to sleep. To combat these issues furthermore, they built Healing Humanity Centers to teach their users how to responsibly use their products. They made these centers into the greatest resorts the world had ever seen. They had large swimming pools and sandy beaches and 5-star cuisine and top-of-the-line workout centers and theaters and beautiful spas and casinos and strip clubs and amusement parks. People deliberately stopped taking care of their basic needs just so that way they could spend a month or two at one of them. They treated their visits like trading cards, collecting every resort they possibly could. The stock prices soared, higher than any stock before it, and the fame of Big Will the Killer of Sadness grew with it. And before long, the little article by Kurt Buchanan, once believed to be a potential downfall of Healing Humanity Pharmaceuticals, had become a laughingstock. He was fired from the New York Times, and his reputation was obliterated, and his kids disowned him, and his wife had left him. And then, as a result of his mockery, ended his life. Saturday Night Live performed the most popular cold open in the show's history. In the sketch, right before the actor playing Kurt went to hang himself, a second actor portraying Big Will, the Killer of Sadness, entered the apartment. "Wait!" he yelled. "Kurt, don't do it! Don't kill yourself! Take one of these begone pills instead! It'll cure your pain! It'll make all of the sadness go away!" Big Will ran to Kurt as quickly as he could and gestured to him with one small white pill. And Kurt, with the rope already tied around his neck, looked at the pill and then looked at Big Will. "Big Will," said Kurt, "I will never take one of your pills. You, sir, you are killing humanity." "Me?" said Big Will, the Killer of Sadness. "Killing humanity? I offer them happy pills. You're the one who killed yourself." And the crowd, high on begone pills, laughed hysterically as the actors playing Kurt and Big Will, the Killer of Sadness, turned to the camera and yelled in unison, "And live from New York, it's Saturday night!"